Yeah, a bit of Sunday painting.
Where do you want me to sit? Where should I
Well,
sit?
first of all, I'm just sort of taking out, this light is just going to come around here like that. So I think, to avoid all that, I think somewhere like this.
I've come across this before.
This sort of chap.
Yeah, oh, I know the
One
sort.
would expect it of a foreigner, but a gentleman, an English gentleman there.
You'd think you know better, wouldn't you?
Well, you'd think he would, and immediately sort of classes himself as anything other than a gentleman.
It's ludicrous, the whole business, I know.
Yes.
I've had worse.
A cad or a bounder?
Probably both.
Go on, Ryan.
I wrote a play for the Greenfields Theatre Company when he was at school at Greenfields in Sussex. And he had one of the lead roles. There were 2 lead roles and Ryan took one of them. So Ryan at the time was reading Stephen Fry's biography.
Oh, right.
The first
Which one? He's written about 24. Moab was my washpot or something.
I don't know which one it was, but he was reading one. And he was also enthralled and entertained by Stephen Fry's lectures about Shakespeare. And was a big Stephen Fry fan.
Right.
And Stephen Fry was at a meeting in London
Ready when you are.
at the Rivington Club with a fellow whose daughter was one of Ryan's fellow pupils. She then got on the phone to Stephen Fry and told Stephen Fry that one of the lead actors in this performance, which was my son, was a huge fan of his, not only his writing, but also his Shakespeare lectures. And so Stephen Fry asked one of the staff, I'm going to look at you, asked one of the staff at the Rivington to provide him with a cocktail menu, which apparently is very famous. And he wrote a lovely message on the back for Ryan saying, I understand that you're making your theatrical debut. Don't break a leg, or break a leg, or something, and in brackets, not for real though, because that would be silly.
It would be.
Wishing you all the very best, Stephen Fry. Which then came home to us, and we had it framed. And it hangs on his bedroom wall. Subsequently, he was appearing, talking about his biography at, I think, Bridgewater Hall in Manchester. And Ryan really wanted to go and see him. So he took a train from Sussex up to Birmingham, and we drove up to Manchester together, myself and Ryan and Vicky, my wife. And we sat in the audience patiently, clutching a copy of Mr. Fry's biography, autobiography. And I left moments before he finished and stood in line. Dutifully,
actually, as well.
and respectfully, and obtained a personalised dedication in this book for Ryan, and gave Mr. Fry a copy of Quite Believe in Angels, within which was a little note which I wrote, saying, thank you for the inspiration and whatever my son has learned a great deal from your Shakespeare lectures and thoroughly enjoyed your writing. And I commented on the fact that he and I had both been expelled as young men from prestigious public schools in England for the same felony of credit card fraud. And
I'll edit that out, don't worry.
No, it's fine. And a week or 2 later, he sent me just the loveliest email and said, thank you for your book, hugely appreciated. It's gone on to my to-be-read pile, and he made some comments about this expulsion, this mutual experience of being expelled from public school for credit card fraud, and I just thought it was lovely that he took the trouble.
Have you stayed in touch since?
No. I received notification through the post. It looked like some sort of an injunction. 300 metres, I think, was mentioned. The other experience I had, not dissimilar, which was not a personal meeting, but I was very moved by, very touched by, was I read Le Carré's book, The Constant Gardener. And then I saw the film with Mr. Fiennes and Mrs. James Bond, Rachel Weisz.
Yeah, that's right.
And I wrote a letter to John Le Carré, care of his London literary agent. And evidently, the letter arrived with his agent. She forwarded it to his London address. He wasn't at his London address, he was residing somewhere in Cornwall at the time, or Devon. And The letter was forwarded to him there, and he wrote back to me 2 pages on vellum in fountain pen.
Wow.
On the most beautiful letterhead. And said, thank you very much for your letter. And I'd made reference to the fact that he must have gotten into some sort of trouble for
Stuff.
the subject of the book, exposing, the criminality of drug companies in Africa, offering people free health care and using them as guinea pigs for testing drugs. And he said, yeah, I did get into some trouble for it, but nowhere near as much trouble as I got into when I wrote The Little Drummer Girl in the 70s, which was about the Israel-Palestine conflict. So he's certainly a man who's been harried and harassed by the authorities for some of the books that he's written. But the simple fact that a man of his literary stature, and obviously extraordinarily busy, and the number of communications he must receive from people, to have taken the time and trouble to have written to me by hand.
Right, yeah.
He even said, I've been on your website, I have to apologise, but I've not actually read any of your work. I tend to, as I've grown older, I tend to err more towards non-fiction than fiction. I read very little fiction these days.
Oh, really, yeah.
But
how old is he now?
He's in his 80s, he must be.
in his 80s, probably get on for 90.
Is he? Wow.
Apparently he's turned down a knighthood 3 times.
Haven't we all?
Because of his disagreement with the way that nurses and doctors are paid and treated in the National Health Service.
That's his reason for turning down?
Apparently so.
Nice.
I don't know where I read that, but I did research why he'd declined.
You did?
Yeah. But he seems like a very honourable gentleman, honourable schoolboy.
You're working on another book now, are you? Have you got anything in mind? Or?
No, I've finished a book which is being published in early 2019.
Has this got anything to do with JFK? And
How did you know that?
well, I've been doing a bit of research myself, Roger, and I suspect it's about the concept of what might have happened if JFK had actually survived his assassination and that sort of thing. Would I be
Yes.
correct? It is.
That's uncanny.
That was a lucky guess.
Strangely disturbing.
Really?
Yeah. So it's based on the premise that an attempt was made, which failed,
Oh.
which he was unaware of, and the Secret Service were unaware of in November of 1963.
Oh, really?
And
Gosh.
he was obviously in tremendously poor physical condition,
Bad time.
suffering from severe osteoporosis, Addison's disease. He'd been on Ritalin for most of his adult life. He was on all manner of potions and preparations. They were using a cherry picker to get him into AF1 because he couldn't do the stairs. He was
Really?
in that bad physical condition.
How old was he?
Well, he became president at 43, didn't he? So he's 46 years old.
Yeah, I thought he was younger than that even, actually. Yeah.
So his relationship with Jackie apparently was tremendously strained as a result of his myriad infidelities.
Right.
There was the situation with Marilyn Monroe, who apparently also had a relationship with Robert.
Right.
Judith Exner, who was also involved with both Sinatra and Sam Giancana. And all manner of rumours. Also, there was an ongoing investigation behind the scenes by the Republican Party into the election itself in 1960, because out of 69 million votes, Kennedy won by 122,000. And there were rumours that Daley, the mayor of Chicago, had withheld Illinois votes until he knew which way the vote was swinging. Also, the belief that Kennedy made a deal under the table with some of the significant organised crime family heads in America
God.
to get them to influence the unions, the Teamsters. You're talking about the cab drivers, the people who do the waste disposal, you're talking about the plumbers and electricians, all those union members who were influenced by their bosses, influenced by the unions, the Teamsters, to vote a certain way that would put Kennedy in the White House, on the understanding that when Kennedy was in the White House, Robert, the youngest son, would become Attorney General, and he would go all easy on organised crime. He did the reverse, much the reverse. and therefore the mafia, Italian-American organised crime syndicates, felt that they'd been betrayed by the Kennedys, which was another motivation for having him terminated, apart from the fact that he was trying to pull out of Vietnam and all sorts of things.
Really?
Anyway, the book is based on the premise that the assassination attempt by Oswald, who obviously was one of several who were present when he was killed in Dallas in 1963, whether or not he was directly responsible for any of the bullets that proved fatal, who knows? But that's an argument that will rage on forever. But he was definitely present in Dallas at the time. Maybe he was just the patsy, the fall guy, who knows? Anyway,
You don't have a...
I'm not getting into that.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
getting into that. I am basing it on the premise that Oswald appeared late and the motorcade had gone, and so he then,
Oh, right.
with an intent to finish the job that he started, works out a way to continue and successfully assassinate Kennedy. But the book's more about a frustrated photojournalist who did a handful of months in Korea and came back a somewhat broken man, traumatized by his experiences in the Korean War, whose girlfriend commits suicide, ex-girlfriend commits suicide, and there's something, and she's a newspaper reporter, Washington newspaper reporter, and there's something in her personal effects that indicates that she has been investigating Kennedy on corruption in the vote process, the election process. So he pursues these threads, and it takes him to Dallas, and it takes him to Washington, and it takes him different places around the country. And the more he digs, the more it becomes obvious that it's not only the election rigging process that's got the potential to undermine Kennedy, there's numerous other things going on as well. And it's in the run-up to the new election in November of 1964, where Kennedy would have been running to assume a second 4-year term.
Yeah.
It's uncertain who he's going to run against. Will Nixon run again? Hubert Humphrey? I mean, who knows? And it deals with really the West Wing, Pierre Salinger. It deals with McNamara, Secretary of Defense, LBJ obviously as Vice President, and the internal workings of the Kennedy administration as they navigate this sort of circuitous, challenging path towards the Democratic National Committee in August of 1964. While this journalist pursues Jack Ruby and prostitutes in Nashville, prostitutes in Dallas, and Lord knows what else, that appear to know something about what happened in November of '63 in the previous year, when Oswald was going to kill Kennedy.
Yeah.
That's essentially the premise of the book. So it's sort of that slice of history, that 6 months of history, retold from the viewpoint of what would have happened had Kennedy not died in November of '63.
Yeah.
So that's done, that's finished.
It is, but it's not coming out till 2019.
Early 2019.
Why is that? Why does it take so long?
It's got more to do with the publisher's existing publication schedule than anything else.
Right.
I mean, we've published a book every year since 2003. We skipped one.
Was that when Candlemoth came out?
2003.
Was
yeah.
it? Wow.
So
15 years ago.
15 years ago, we've done 14 books. So
Wow.
early 2019, it will be getting on for 16 years since the first book, but we will have published 15. So we've sort of missed a year. It's not that uncommon. It has to do with promotion, it has to do with marketing, it has to do with the way in which publishers schedule different publications, and more to do with what they don't want a new publication to conflict with than anything else.
Right. No, that makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah.
But it's interesting, actually, having written it, there's parallels between some of the things going on with the Trump administration that were actually going on with the Kennedy administration, which not a great deal of people know about.
Right.
How riddled it was with insecurities and doubts and internal corruption, and a very predominant and profound sense of doubt in Kennedy's capacity as a head of state
Right.
because of his physical condition primarily, and also because morally he was
Yeah.
suspect.
Yeah.
He was of dubious moral.
Character.
Yes.
What?
The allergy medication he was taking had the capacity to precipitate psychotic meltdown, and on several occasions he had a psychotic break,
Did he?
became violent and threatening and broke things and this and that and the other. The osteoporosis and the Addison's disease, which were rapidly deteriorative conditions, both of them, made him unstable, nervous, agitated, easily agitated.
How extraordinary.
And he took sedatives. You know, he was taking Ritalin, which is
Yeah, heard of that one,
speed,
Yeah.
Nice.
heavy speed. You know, and he was taking a lot of sleeping tablets in order to wind down and get to sleep. So he was on a cocktail of half a dozen different things. You know,
Right, yeah.
he had spinal injections for the osteoporosis, antihistamines in huge dosages, Ritalin, painkillers. He was on barbiturates to sleep,
Wow.
amphetamines to
Wake
keep
up.
it. Meanwhile, you know,
Is this widely known, or am I just totally ignorant? I had no idea he was.
it's
in that sort of condition.
I wouldn't say it was necessarily widely known, but it's certainly not undocumented from authoritative sources, and easy to find if you
All right.
become interested in.
Such
Anything.
matters. Right. Yeah.
Because of course, the real goal of Kennedy Senior, Joseph Kennedy Senior, who himself is a very interesting fellow, was to put Joseph Jr. in the White House. Joseph Jr. was the heroic American fighter pilot who was killed in the Second World War.
In action, really. Yeah.
John was the second and Robert was the third brother. Then there was Rose, who was bright and beautiful, somewhat educationally challenged, who they had lobotomized and then incarcerated in a home for troubled children. She stayed there essentially for the rest of her life. I mean, a really, you know, very strange, Joseph Kennedy Senior, interesting fellow, invested in the film industry in Hollywood in its advent. Had his sights set on buying out a cinema chain that was owned by a Greek tycoon, Greek businessman, called Pantage, Pantages, Alex Pantage, I think. And he offered him, I think, $8 million to buy his cinema chain. Pantage declined. So Kennedy got a young starlet to file sexual abuse claims against Pantage. Pantage was tried, paid for his own defence, which bankrupted him, and Kennedy stepped in and bought the Pantage theatre chain for $3 million, $5 million less than he originally offered him. Later on, the starlet, whose name I can't remember, 10 years later said it was all bogus and she was paid to do it, and so. This was after Kennedy Senior had had the stroke and I think had died. So Kennedy then owned this chain of the Pantage cinema chain, and it was absorbed into RKO, I believe, Radio Keith Orpheum.
So what it stands for? I've heard of the
Yes.
initial.
RKO Pictures, I think it was absorbed into that, and Kennedy was a significant player. He was ambassador to London during the Second World War, friends with Roosevelt when Roosevelt was Secretary of the Navy, because he was, I think, Secretary of Defense. Roosevelt was Secretary of the Navy, and together they concocted steel purchasing deals which made both of them a fortune, and they took backhanders and all sorts of things. Roosevelt was the one that tipped off Kennedy that Prohibition was about to be repealed. So Joe Kennedy and Roosevelt's son, who I think was called James, went to Scotland and secured exclusive rights to import Scotch into America. a year or so before Prohibition was repealed. So when Prohibition was repealed,
Yeah.
and that apparently was the money that paid for his son to get into the White House.
Wow.
That was where the money
really?
came from.
Wow.
From the repeal of Prohibition and the import of Scotch into the United States. So it's all, you know, corrupt and
Murky.
backhanders and
Isn't
people
it?
connected to people who connected to people and keeping everybody else in power and living out of each other's pockets, you know.
Yeah. Do you have any political ambitions, Roger?
No. So Andrew McCarthy said that politics is a game for people intelligent enough to understand it but stupid enough to think it's important.
Right. Yeah.
No, I have no political aspirations whatsoever.
Neither do I.
I'm a devoted royalist.
Are you really?
Absolutely.
So why are you so popular in France, Roger?
Because the French are the most intelligent and tasteful people in the world.
Right.
I honestly don't know. I have a French teacher because I'm learning the language.
You are?
And Vicky gave her a copy of one of my books. And she read it. And Vicky said, "Why do you think these books are so popular in France?" And she said, because in her personal experience, French as readers are just as interested in the psychological motivation and the emotional journey of a character as they are in the denouement.
Yeah.
They have a bent towards emotion, psychology, psychological analysis, and the books are really human dramas. They're not crime novels per se. They do address the psyche of human beings, the psychology of the human condition. The interesting thing about France, for me, is the importance with which books are viewed.
So did you target France or do you
No.
publishers?
No,
initially? Yeah.
no. I mean, I'm published in 26 languages.
26.
But I sell more books in France than the other 25 languages combined, including English. So what you have in France is this tremendous sense of inherent value that still exists in books. A book is not cheap. A paperback is 8 or 9 euros. Their equivalent of a hardback, which is called grand format, is 20, 22, 23 euros. It's 18, 19, 20 pounds for what we would consider a hardback. So an author, if he sells reasonable amounts, can actually generate a satisfactory living. But it's more to do with the importance that books are granted, the inherent value maintained in books by keeping a constant price no matter where you buy it.
Yeah.
And it's the responsibility of the independent bookshop owners to make their own bookshops successful. So they create festivals, they create events. You go to a book signing in France, it can go on all day.
But do you actually relish the books, you know, the meeting and greeting
Yes.
side of things? You do?
I love it.
Oh, right, yeah.
Well, writing a book is a very insular activity.
It is. It is.
Much the same as writing and recording music, and then you go and play live,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
you go on a book tour, or you whatever, and because you write a book and a year later it's published. You sit in a room by yourself for 3 months and you write a book, and you deal with your editor and your agent, and you change this and change that, and finally it's done. You proofread it, and then 9 months later or a year later it appears in the bookshops. You don't speak to anybody about it.
No.
So I finished it, first draft. I do it at a straight run, not reading anything that I've written until I finish the book.
Right.
I write without an outline, write without a synopsis. Don't know the end until I get there.
Really, really, literally.
Yeah.
So you start with a concept and just keep
I start
going.
with a very,
and
very simple, very basic concept.
Right.
And it's kind of a spontaneous and organic thing. And I'll write, when I'm writing, I aim to do maybe 3,500 to 5,000 words a day. Most I've ever done in a day was 11,000, but I didn't do anything the next day.
I should hope not. No.
I lay on the floor and
Yeah.
kind of drooled.
Whimpering, probably.
Yeah, whimpering, yeah.
Yeah.
So I aim to have a first draft done in sort of 10 to 12 weeks, 150,000 words, give or take. Then I'll not look at it for a couple of weeks, and then I'll go back to the beginning and read through it, fixing the things that now don't make sense, because I now know the end.
Yeah.
When that's done, I'll send it to my editor. You know, I went to his wedding. He stayed at my house, I've stayed at his. We've travelled, we did Washington together for a week, documentary with the BBC. We went to Georgia with Channel 4 and did a documentary about Quiet Belief and Angels together. We don't socialise.
But you're chums.
He's a splendid, splendid individual whose opinion I value enormously. And he's the first person to read it from a professionally objective perspective. And he's extraordinarily good at what he does. I mean, you look at the authors in his stable and who he personally edits, and you know, I'm in august company, definitely. And very fortunate to have him. Very fortunate to have him as an editor. So he comes back with broad brushstroke edit, which I then do, which is usually, you know, 2 or 3 days work. And then it'll go back and he'll do what's called a line edit. And a line edit is where he will literally go through it line by line.
Wow.
And he'll tuck in the corners and tidy up this and make suggestions, none of which I'm bound by, none of which I'm obligated to execute, but they're usually very good. Then it goes away for copy editing. Copy editing is a process whereby somebody will read it from the viewpoint of continuity, fact-checking. You know, Frank starts chapter 3 in a white shirt, but he starts chapter 4 in a blue shirt, and when did he change? And so-and-so's birthday is June the 20th on this page, but it's June the 26th on this page. When that's done, I approve all the copy edits. Then it goes to typesetting, and that's where somebody sits down and retypes the entire manuscript in from scratch from my manuscript. Not digitally, they don't do a digital transfer. One, because of the software that's used, and two, to prevent viruses going into their machinery for whatever. Anyway, they type the thing in from scratch and they set it, they lay it out. Then I receive what's called page proofs, which is a ream of A4 with the text and the font and the page size printed exactly as it will appear, numbered exactly as it will in the book, with the preface and the foreword and the acknowledgements and the dedication, yada yada yada. And I have to proofread it, and 4 people proofread it generally, and then my assistant editor will collate all 4 proofread versions and send it back to the typesetter for correction of the typos. That's the last chance at which I have, the last chance I have to change anything. So that's done, and then it goes into production, and maybe a week or so before it's published I'll receive a copy. When it comes to the foreign versions, I have no input on who translates it, what they call it, or the design of the cover. I do have the odd conversation with translators who might email me or phone me and say, this is a really unusual 1940s American slang expression, and I just cannot figure out how to translate this. What were you trying to say, or what does it mean?
That's a very good point. How does that translate?
Well, there was a great example of that was in Bad Signs. When they're in detention, the 2 young lads, one of them says to the other...
Are they you and your brother in any way?
No.
Not at all?
No, because we've never been on the run from the federal authorities, and I've never been involved in violent sex crimes to that...
Never?
To that extent.
Not to that extent?
No.
Right.
So there's a scene where the 2 lads, the 2 brothers, are in the detention, and the older one, says to the younger one, I'm a hot potato. And he goes, how so? And he says, they've got me for assault and buttery.
Oh.
Right. Which is a really bad pun.
It is.
But that will not translate into French. So what the French translator did, he said, the older one says to the younger one, he says, the problem with me is they think I've got sensitive skin. How so? Because they keep me in the shade all the time. And in the shade is a French expression meaning in prison. So he found a similar, a play on words, and jeu de mots.
Game of words, oui, jeu de mots.
For that
play of words.
Yeah, for that kind of context that kind of worked in that way.
Yeah.
So he's an interesting guy, great translator.
there's quite a lot of American terminology that. How does that translate into?
He's got Franco-American parentage.
Has he?
And he lived for a long time in America. He lived for a long time in France. He's effortlessly bilingual.
But I suppose there must be a tradition of that in France anyway, with,
Yeah.
subtitling American films. There
Yeah.
must- yeah.
But also expressions, translation of a work of fiction is more art than science. I've never met him actually. The first time I met him was in Bordeaux, and I was in Bordeaux
Right.
for a book festival. And we finished at the book festival, we all went off for dinner, publicists and translators and Lord knows who else, editors, Vicky, a gang of us, and we went to a bar in Bordeaux because my editor stroke publisher at the time, the girl who travelled with me, did her university studies in Bordeaux, and she knew Bordeaux very well. And she said, I know a great bar, so we went there, and it was late, probably getting on for midnight, and I went to the bar to buy a round of drinks for everybody, and I was stood at the bar, propping up the bar, as is my wont,
Yeah.
and somebody goes, "Oi!" And I turn around, this guy's looking at me. Looks like the bastard love child of Jerry Lee Lewis and Gene Vincent,
Right.
leather jacket and quiff, and
Yeah.
very cool looking guy.
Shades.
And I said, yes, and he says, it's you. And I said, it's you. And he says, how are you? And I said, I'm good, how are you? And he says, so how goes it? And I said, it's fine. And he says, you're on a book tour? And I said, how did you know that? And he says, because I'm your translator.
Right.
It was interesting,
Yeah.
So
Did he manage to catch a free drink off you?
absolutely.
He did. Good.
Absolutely, probably several.
Yeah.
Probably several. And then I had breakfast with him the following morning. Wonderful chap.
Right.
Translator and DJ.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Extraordinary.
yeah. Real muso, real.
Are you the same RJ Ellory that's the notorious hard drinking frontman of RJ Ellory and the Whiskey Poets, by any chance?
Yes.
You are that man?
I am that man.
Excellent. Well, what's the latest stuff? You got a new album in the.
New album is finished.
Is it? Right.
It was mastered the other day by John Astley, who is Pete Townshend's brother-in-law, in
Wow.
an amazing house that faces the old club on Eel Pie Island.
Twickenham way.
Yeah, over the Thames. So he bought the house off Pete Townsend. He's married to Pete Townshend's sister, and does the mastering of the album. So that was done the other day.
Right.
But what we're doing at the moment with our new management and distribution company, Pledge Music, is we are releasing an EP of 4 tracks. And the EP has 4 songs on it, the titles of which are
Book titles.
A Dark and Broken Heart, Kings of America, A Quiet Belief in Angels, and Bad Signs.
Ah.
And there will be an 8-page booklet in there with photographs and text that explains to some degree the relationship of books to music. And we're creating that, and it will be available for sale alongside the first album, Low Country, through Pledge Music, along with all manner of nostalgia, memorabilia, and various accoutrements that we're making available for sale. And we're going to be doing some club gigs in London. We're looking at doing some concerts in Paris. We've played in Lille, we've played in Strasbourg, we've played in Toulouse,
Have you?
but we haven't played in Paris yet, and we want to play in Paris.
I'd be tempted by that one, I must say.
And but what we're going to do up in Covent Garden, there's a place called the Hospital Club, and they do an evening presentation that is Q&A and live music interspersed. I've written 70, 80, 90, 100 songs, and over the years I've written poems and lyrics and this and that and the other. I mean, how the Whiskey Poets started, when I was 44, Ryan,
Your son.
yes, my son Ryan, who at the time was about 13, 12, said he wanted to learn the guitar. I told him, I said, Ryan, father to son, there's 3 things that you need to know in order to secure favourable attentions from a member of the opposite sex.
Right.
You know how to iron a shirt well, so it's crisp and presentable. I said, you should know how to cook an excellent meal from literally anything
Right.
that can be found in the fridge. And you should be able to serenade her with a fine vocal styling accompanied by yourself on an instrument of your choice. And he says, well, you used to play the guitar, didn't you? And I said, well, I dabbled when I was a teenager. He says, well, I would like to take guitar lessons. And understanding the fickle nature of teenagers, I said, I will rescue a guitar I still own from the loft, and I will show you the few chords that I vaguely remember.
Acoustic or?
No, it was an electric guitar. It was the Fender Stratocaster. And I will, and if the bug gets you, then I will pay for lessons. The bug did not get him, but it got me. So at 44, I picked up the guitar again, not having picked it up for 25 years plus, and sort of went at it furiously. And I'd got songs that I'd written earlier when I was a teenager in my early 20s, and I dug some of those out, and I learned some songs by other people. And do I need to shut up?
No, please carry on. It's all down to me, this, I'm afraid, my present predicament. That's okay.
Okay. And I started writing some new stuff, and I thought this would be a splendid thing to do. So I got together with a couple of friends, and we went into a rehearsal room, and we started writing some stuff together, and we ended up going to see a fellow called Martin Smith, who was the last touring bass player of the Electric Light Orchestra down in Sussex, who had a studio, who the bass player of this band had previously worked with as a session musician. So we went down there and we recorded an album, which was fine, all very furious and angry. And it was three people with entirely diverse musical tastes trying to create something that coalesced. And it kind of did, and it kind of didn't. Anyway, it was an interesting experience, certainly a steep learning curve for me.
What happened to those recordings?
They exist, the album exists.
What was it called?
The band was called Zero Navigator, and the album didn't have a title. Martin and I stayed in touch by phone, and I remember one day reading to him over the telephone the lyrics to a song, and he said, that's just tremendous. He says, you should put music to that. I said, well, there kind of is. And he says, well, do you want to do a solo album? You've got all this material and it should be out there. And I said, well, yeah, okay. So we came up to Birmingham and we started going through this vast encyclopedia of material that I'd written. And he had some really interesting ideas and said, well, if you truncate that chorus there, truncate that verse there, and put a chorus in there, put a bridge in there, and do this and that and the other. And he sort of looked at me and says, do you want to do this together? And I said, what, you mean like a band? And he says, yeah. And he, so we started writing together. So I'll go to him with a basic concept, or he'll come to me with a basic concept, and I'll already have lyrics, or I'll write lyrics to it, and then we'll arrange it together and put it together. It's very much a collaboration. And he's worked with so many great musicians over the years. And he said, I've got some really good ideas for bass players and drummers who might be interested in working with us. And the first two choices, the four of us got together in this rehearsal studio down in Sussex, and we just hit it off. So we started working together, and we put the 11 songs together that are the first album, did some gigs. Martin and I continued writing. Then we got a commission from Universal Records to write 6 songs and 6 instrumentals for use in film and television soundtracks, which he and I did. We wrote the music, and then the lads, we hired them in as session musicians, as hired guns, and they came and did the bass and the drums and percussion and all that. We had Hossam Ramsey on it, the Egyptian percussionist who did all the post Led Zepp acoustic stuff with Page and Plant. I think.
Really? I saw them live.
He's done 4 albums with Peter Gabriel, and he's done a whole bunch of albums with Shakira. He's got a platinum disc for Kashmir. And he's a lovely fellow. So he did percussion on the first album. Yeah. And he did some percussion on stuff that we did for Universal. And then the second official band album, which is called Native Strangers.
That's the one ready to go, is it? Yeah.
Well, it's in the bag. It's in the can, so to speak. It's mixed and mastered. There are 12 songs that we recorded, one of which is a cover which may or may not be released. We don't really do covers, but it's such a good song, I liked.
What was it? What's the cover?
The cover was a song called River Rat Jimmy and Jehoshaphat by a guy called Kelly Joe Phelps, who's a great blues artist, American blues artist. But there's 11 originals, but we have a new manager, fine figure of a man, who actually contacted me because he was a reader of my books and had heard that I was getting involved in music, and we started this dialogue by email about my books. And I said, what do you do? And he says, well, I'm a band manager. So I met him in London, and we hit it off, and I had a meeting with him in Covent Garden the other day with a distribution company who are looking at promoting and distributing the albums, the music, and it was his idea. Because I'd written A Quiet Belief in Angels, I'd written Bad Signs, and I'd written Kings of America, which were on the album. And he says, write one more song that's a book title, and let's do an EP with a booklet in it, with a bunch of photographs. And so I wrote Dark and Broken Heart, which we liked so much, that's going on the album as well. So there's 4 book titles that are songs.
Do they refer to
not
the
really.
content of the books?
Not really, but they are Americana, and they are emotive, and they are dark. So just from the viewpoint of I guess subject matter and atmosphere, there's a direct correlation between what I'm doing from a literary point of view and what I'm doing from a musical point of view. Then we've got Dark and Broken Heart, written by Michael Knieves, who is a great screenwriter based in LA, but he's Canadian. That's hopefully going to production in the not too distant future. Amat Escalante, who was Best Director in Cannes in 2013 and Best Director at Venice in 2016, who's currently directing a couple of the episodes of a Netflix series called Narcos. I think it's Netflix.
Yeah.
He's signed up before Christmas to direct Dark and Broken Heart. I was commissioned many years ago by Olivier Dan, French director who directed Marion Cotillard in La Vie en Rose, about the life of Edith.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
He commissioned me to write the screenplay for A Quiet Belief in Angels, which is probably my most well-known book. So I did a direct book-to-screen adaptation of that, book-to-screenplay adaptation of that. The original version was just over 5 hours long.
Right.
And then I did a truncated version of about 2 to 2.5 hours. It didn't fly. It didn't get made. I got the option back after about 18 months, and I was approached by a writer-director from the Spielberg-Lucas stable, who worked on the Young Highlander, who worked on Young Indiana Jones series and Highlander, and so. Really lovely guy, very, very talented guy called René Manzor, and he and I are adapting the original 5-hour screenplay version, and we're transposing the story from Georgia and New York to the Camargue and Paris during the occupation. So it's essentially the same story, but located differently with a different sort of motivation behind it.
Yeah.
Endemol, a very large European television company, have bought the development rights for that, so we're on the go with that. I'm in collaboration now with a UK film production company called Dark Alliance, and I'm co-writing a 12-part adaptation of A Quiet Vendetta. First episode is written.
Is it? Right.
Episode storyline we've done. There's a great story actually of one notebook, nice leather-bound notebook, this size, like A5.
Yeah. Where'd you get them? Smiths?
I steal them from various stationery establishments.
Good.
They have to be stationary,
Because
if they're moving you can't.
It's harder to hold them, yeah.
So I flew from Dublin to New York.
Yeah.
It was in fact the first trip I made to America in 2009.
Because you've been writing American-based stories since
I've been
long
lying
before that, haven't you? Yeah.
for a long time. Yeah, for quite some years before that. That's an interesting story in itself.
We'll decide that, Roger. Just
I'll venture it.
yeah, go on.
And
See
you
how we
quantify
react.
it on
Yeah.
the scale of interesting.
Yeah.
So it was my first tour in America.
Right.
And I was going when A Quiet Belief in Angels was published in the States, and I was doing, I think, 9 cities, beginning in New York, all the way down to Miami, Chicago, Atlanta, different places, Indianapolis. And I had one of these notebooks, and it had all the notes in from when I was writing Quiet Belief in Angels.
Oh.
And I was working on another book and using the same notebook to, put notes in. And I left it in the pocket of the airplane seat in front of me and got off the plane in Dublin. No, I left it in the seat when I got off the plane in New York.
Right.
Did my tour, realised I'd left it behind, and then about 6 months later, maybe 3 months later, I remember posting something about it on Facebook, probably, and somebody got a hold of me. Somebody took it upon themselves to find it.
Right.
And they got hold of the airline, tracked it back to the New York Port Authority, which dealt with lost and found off aircraft, located the book in New York Port Authority lost and found by phone, got them to FedEx it at my American publisher's expense to my American publisher in New York, who then mailed it to her in the UK. And she turned up at a crime fiction festival and presented me.
You had no forewarning of this?
No.
Amazing. Amazing.
So I think at the time I had 6 or 7 books out, so I got first editions of all of them and signed them all and sent them to her as a modest thank you.
Token of gratitude.
Yeah, for doing that, which was tremendous.
It was, wasn't it? Yeah.
Tremendous.
She's obviously a bit of a fan.
Well, yeah, she was. I mean, or just a really nice person, a really good human being.
You hadn't thought of that, had you?
No.
I did write longhand for many years, and I wrote many books. 22 books in longhand I wrote.
Amazing.
And then I typed them on a manual typewriter, and then Tipex them, photocopied them, and posted them. Between 1987 and 2003, the first 6 years I was writing, I wrote 22 novels in longhand, typed them by hand, photocopied them, posted them, accumulated more than 600 letters of rejection from 100 different publishers, both here and in the US, and spent 12 grand on postage and photocopying in the late 80s and early 90s. I didn't pay off that debt because I borrowed the money on credit cards to do this. I didn't actually clear that borrowing until 2009. Because £12,000 in the late 80s, early 90s was a lot more than £12,000 now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah.
Dear God.
My handwriting. My grandmother made me do handwriting exercises
Copper
every
plate?
day. Well, it's not really copper plate, no. I was scribbling this on the train, so it's not really fair.
That's incredibly...
On the train, Ken. Shall I read you what I wrote this morning?
Go on then, read it out. First
That's what I
one.
was talking about.
Yeah.
For a while I've been contemplating the consequences of the choices we make concerning our own lives. I'm not a fatalist. Let me put that card on the table at the outset. I do not believe in destiny, save that we have the power to determine it. I do not believe in luck. As far as I'm concerned, it is a myth. Luck acknowledges that there are forces more powerful than ourselves that can influence our lives for better or worse. That is a possibility that I cannot accept. Of course, life can be horribly random, and it is that randomness that all too often is afforded the guise of luck. I am a firm believer in the degree to which we determine what happens to us by our own attitude. I'm not talking about superficial I'm not talking about superficial motivational.
Shall I edit this out? I'll edit it out.
Would you like another whiskey?
Take your time. Yeah.
I'm not talking about superficial motivational. Why can't I? Motivational.
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 Might as well use it.
I'm not talking about superficial motivational bullshit here. But honest to God, recognition that everything that happens is perceived and thus influenced by your outlook. It really is a matter of deciding how you want to feel about something and being aware that you and you alone are more than capable of deciding how you feel about that thing. People, painful truth though it may be, decide to be a victim. They decide to fail, even though all outward appearances might suggest that they are doing all they can to succeed. Bound by some inescapable need to show the world how tough it all is, their own attitude undermines all their positive seeming efforts, and thus they succeed by failing. In the main, and certainly from my own personal experience, a great deal of, quote, failure is merely an insufficiency of perseverance. It has been said that most of life's problems are solved with 20 seconds of courage, and it seems, again from my own experience, that the courage lies in the decision. Once the decision, whatever that may be, has been made, then all else is a matter of persevering against whatever odds and obstacles with which one is faced until the original decision is executed. And yes, it may be the case that the decision is never fully realised, but as so often is the case, there is far greater joy in the journey than the destination. I find it fascinating when others express their desire to have my life. That may sound odd, it may surprise you, and it certainly surprises me to know the number of times people tell me how, quote, lucky I am to be published, to go on tour, to front a band and write and record music. I am told that I am, quote unquote, fortunate to have whatever abilities they conceive I might possess. My first published novel was the 24th I wrote. Anyone who has learned a musical instrument appreciates the thousands of hours required to gain any degree of mastery. I did not pursue any education beyond the age of 16. I did not go to college or university. I possess no formal qualifications in any subject. Nothing at all. Orphaned at 7, my maternal grandmother became my legal guardian. I saw her infrequently as I spent the next 9 years in various boarding schools, one of which I was expelled from, and a home for wayward and orphaned boys. I also did a brief and very educational stint in jail. I do remember one life lesson my grandmother taught me. What if, she said, is the question with which to begin your life, not end it. I thought you were going to say, I think that's absolutely crap.
Yeah. Can we talk about something else? Where do you get these ideas from?
These ridiculous ideas.
Yeah, no, there's much truth in that. There's no disputing it, really. So what's this, talking of biographies, Sir Ellory, that's...
which means only Ellory.
It does.
Sir Ellory.
Yeah.
Is a book... Celery.
Yeah.
That's what I was called at school.
Was it really?
And Duracell.
Copper knob.
Yeah.
Things like that, yeah. I remember you telling me.
It never stuck.
Did it not?
No, I never landed up with a nickname that stuck. I 6 years ago was invited to be the parrain or godfather of a new literary festival in a place called Mulhouse, which is in Alsace near Strasbourg, which was created by two guys, Hervé Val and Dominique Munier, ardent fiction readers, bloggers interested in thrillers and Lord knows what else.
That's it. Brilliant. Thank you.
And they asked me to go to Mulhouse and be the godfather of the debut of this festival, which I did, and it was wonderful. And we got along famously, and I went the subsequent year, the other year. Last year, I took the band.
Oh, you did? Right.
We played a great concert in Strasbourg for the end of the festival.
Anyone turn up?
No.
Oh,
Apart from people that we paid.
right.
So it was altogether tremendously expensive.
Whatever it is.
No, it was great. I mean, a couple of hundred people there. It was a really good venue, great club,
Yeah.
and no, it was great. Loved it.
Anyway.
So they came to me and said, we have an idea. Hervé's daughter, Romane, she was my translator, and she and I got along famously. Extraordinarily bright young lady, and wonderful sense of humour, and superlatively effortless in her bilingual skills.
Mm.
And Hervé came to me with Dominique, and they said, we own our own publishing company. We would like to discuss with you the possibility of publishing a book. biographical. And I said, okay. And so they came to England and stayed with me for about 4 or 5 days and interviewed me on camera for about 30 hours.
Jeez.
And asked me everything. And then Hervé's daughter not only transcribed it from film into text, but also translated it from English into French.
Wow.
Massive project.
Yeah.
And it was published in October last year, and it's conversations, and it's everything to do with music, to do with photography, to do with writing, to do with childhood, to do with where I come from and my personal experiences, and just whatever stuff, everything about me. But it's not somebody else writing it. It's a series of.
It's your voice.
It's a transcription of a series of long conversations about life and the universe and everything, and sex, death, religion, and money, and philosophy, and art, and music, and books, and literature, and
football.
No. It's a fad.
What is football?
A fad. It's a European fad that won't last.
Football, absolutely. Quite agree.
Rugger in the winter.
Yeah.
In icy,
4 times a week we used to have to play. Any conditions.
Icy, horizontal rain.
Yes.
Stings viciously in shorts.
Yeah. Or frost on the ground.
So
rock hard.
Soaked through, frosty ground.
Wretched business. Yeah.
Character building. I went to an interesting school. The last 2 years of my schooling was spent in Oxfordshire. At Kingham Hill School, which was established in the late 1800s by Charles Baring Young of the Barings banking family, as a philanthropic and humanitarian exercise to give underprivileged children of the East End of London an opportunity to receive a halfway decent education.
Right.
He also opened a farm in Canada, and you would attend Kingham Hill School in Kingham, near Chipping Norton, until you were 17, and then you would go to Canada for 4 years and work on a farm and learn a trade, learn how to socialise, get along with other people, and work in groups, and generally be a contributive, social-minded individual.
Right.
And then you would come back into the UK with a trade, with a skill, you see.
Right.
The farm was closed, I think, in the late 60s for funding reasons, but the school remained. And when I was there, it was boys only. It was 4 miles from the nearest post box, 8-foot snowdrifts in the winter. It was cross-country, long-distance running, rugby, cricket in the summer, and there weren't really any maintenance or grounds staff. The kids did it. So the cleaning, we had vast acreage of wooden floor.
Was your brother there as well?
My brother was there.
He was, yeah.
He was a year ahead of me. He was in the same year as Andrew Adonis, who became Lord Adonis.
Oh, him, yeah.
I was in the same year as a fellow who became an Air Marshal. So, some individuals came out of there that did some stuff. The whole thing with, born into a single parent family, because my father disappeared before I was born.
Ah, did you ever meet up with him?
No, but I found out who he was about 3 years ago.
Is he still alive?
I don't know. But I was contacted by a man who's 46, now 48 years old, who's a teacher in Sheffield, who is of the same mother but different father than me, so he's my stepbrother? No, half-brother.
Wow.
Yeah, half-brother, yeah.
And I was in Paris actually, staying at the Lutetia, which is an amazing hotel. Art Deco hotel built in the 20s, which was the headquarters of Abwehr.
Oh yes.
During the occupation.
Right.
And it was the staging point for it was the administrative processing point for all the French Jews that were shipped off to different concentration camps.
Wow.
Amazing place. And it was also the reunion point for all the survivors. So it has this very mixed feel about it. Anyway, so I was there, I went to an event, did a book signing, and Vicky and I went back to the hotel that night, and I'd received an email from this chap, Gary, saying, you and I have the same mother. He said, I've just accessed my birth records, I'm 46 years old, I'm a teacher, I'm up in Sheffield, and you and I have the same mother. And I knew from a woman who was a friend of my mother's in the 60s, that she'd had another child called Damien.
Right. Wow.
And he said, I've accessed my birth records and my birth name is registered as Damien Jeremy Ellory. But I was adopted at birth and I was taken in by a family, and so I've lived up to 46 years of age with my adoptive family's name. And his name is Gary. I'm not going to say his surname.
No.
And it would be great to get in touch with her. And I had to tell him, I'm sorry, she died in 1971. But I have a photograph of her, if you'd like. I also have a photograph of your maternal grandmother, who I did know and live with. Well, I didn't live with her because I was at boarding school and orphanage and stuff, but I would spend holidays with her until 1982, when she died, when I was 16. And, no, I was 15. No, 16 when she died. And I also have a photograph of your maternal grandfather, who I have also not met because he drowned in 1957. And I can send you copies of those. And then I spoke to him a couple of times on the telephone and told him what little I could about the maternal side of his family. As for the paternal side of his family, I contacted this woman who'd been at art college with my mother in the late 60s, and she said, yes, I know when it was that your mother got pregnant with him, and it was a one-night stand with a nightclub singer called Peter after he played a gig at the Tower Ballroom in Birmingham. And that's all I could find out. So I told him that. I said, you're illegitimate like me, one of life's unwashed and unwanted.
How did he take all this?
I think because I'm so spiritually orientated in my perception of the human condition, genetics and hereditary stuff and family and this and that and the other has always played a very secondary role in my personal philosophy about the nature of life and who we are. But I think for him it was a huge disappointment. I found out my father's name, and there's a possibility. I mean, I'm 52, so there's every possibility he could be alive and well. 70, 80, Lord knows what else.
How could you go about tracking him down then, or is it more likely?
Well, it would be easy enough. I just have absolutely no interest in it.
You wouldn't anyway.
No. Well, my viewpoint is this, and my brother concurs. Not the half-brother, because he had a different father, but my full brother, who I also thought was a half-brother until 3 years ago. I was convinced we had different fathers, because physically we're so dissimilar. But apparently not. We are full brothers, which obviously was a tremendous disappointment to me.
Would have been, yeah.
Yeah, knowing him as I do. What a disreputable character he is.
Really?
Yeah. Uncouth proclivities and personal hygiene issues.
Oh.
No, he's a tremendous individual.
Too late.
Edit out the bit where I say he's nice.
Yeah, I will.
So, my viewpoint about my father, which my brother concurs, is that he made a decision that he felt was the best decision. And for whatever reason, he decided not to stick around. He stuck around after my brother was born, because my brother's 14 months older than me. But he left either immediately before or immediately after I was born, and made, as far as I understand, no contact ever since. And I'm not difficult to find.
No.
So he could have, yeah.
Easily. And also my surname is quite unusual.
Is it?
Yes.
Right.
I did a festival in Canada, up in the Eastern Townships, in a art gallery in a place called Knowlton. And we had this launch party for the festival in this art gallery, and they had a book exhibited in this gallery called Red. And it was photographs of random red-headed people. Just a collection of photographs of random red-headed people, kids and old people and whatever. But there were sort of all these factoids and interesting anecdotes about beliefs and myths and legends concerning red-headed people. in the text of this book, inside the cover, inside the front cover and the back cover. And there were certain statistics and a whole list of famous redheads and all this kind of stuff. And one of them, which I found tremendous, was that up until about 100 years ago, 150 years ago, the Greeks believed that when a red-headed person dies, you should take the body outside the city walls, or outside the town walls, or beyond the limits of the town, decapitate them, bury the body face up.
This way, please. Thank you.
Bury the head face down, and bury the body face up. So to prevent the inevitable return of this red-headed person after death as a vampire. Up until about 150 years ago.
Seems fair. I mean,
Can we just hold it for a minute on the conversation? As interesting as it is, I need to
keep your mouth still. Hey, I'll do the talking from now. Tell you my life story. How's that?
How old are you?
Fair enough. Yeah, I'm heading that way. Yeah.
How old are you?
In my 50s. Yeah, certainly.
Okay. You and I are of the same generation, Ken.
Oh yeah. Amphetamines rather than LSD as our chosen drugs in our youth.
I did both, sometimes at the same time.
So did I, actually.
In fact, more often than not at the same time.
Do you miss those days?
No.
Neither do I.
But I wouldn't miss them for the world.
Formative.
I regret
Character building.
I regret nothing.
Yeah.
My
right.
viewpoint being that if you are at least
Alive.
reasonably happy with who you are, and everything that you've done is in some way, shape or form a contributing factor.
Wow, this is true. It's very easy to do that, I can imagine. You achieve some great pinnacle of success in your chosen field, and then you think, well, what next?
What next?
You know, I've done it. I've achieved my life's ambition, you know. So.
I spend most of my time doubting the value of everything that I've done,
Right, I know that feeling.
and just feeling that I need to work harder and do more and, you know, strive.
You do lots of, I mean, your photography is another important part of your
It's a
life's
renewed
activity.
interest.
Is it?
Well, I started taking photographs when I was about 12 or 13. And then it was something I just wasn't financially or time-wise capable of pursuing.
Right.
Because of work and because of writing and because of this, that and the other. And then about a year ago, maybe 9 months ago, I decided to, I just was overcome
Oh, Roger.
with the compulsion to pursue it as an interest once again.
Right.
So everything's changed. No longer celluloid, it's now all digital.
Yeah.
I
You said that with a bit of a sneer.
Well, I resisted. You know,
Really?
I just
Yeah.
love the organic, tactile, tangible quality of celluloid and developing and chemicals and film.
Do you have a darkroom?
No, because I don't
Not for
use
that,
film
anyway.
anymore. It's so expensive now because
Yeah.
it's almost against the law now. But like vinyls, I think it will creep back and take its place alongside. But I Nikon produced a digital camera that looks like the old FE2 that I used to own, which I still own. F4, I used to drag an F4 all over the world, which is about 6 kilos and takes 6 AA batteries. Takes 6 AA batteries. But it was indestructible. You could hit it with a truck and nothing would happen. You know?
Yeah.
Proper photojournalist's professional photographer's camera, which I lusted after. I wrote a blog about it on my photography website.
LonelyEye.net.
Yes.
Oh.
About, I wrote a blog most recently about the Bang Bang Club, the 4 photographers in South Africa that I was talking about. I wrote a blog about Robert Capa, who's wonderful, whose biography and autobiography I read. Great photographer. And I wrote another one just about photography in general. But I also wrote one about my years in boarding school and exposure to National Geographic magazine, not only for the articles and the photographs themselves, but for those tremendously exciting and seductive advertisements for high quality Nikon products.
Really? Right.
And I found some of them on the internet, some of those old ads, and posted them as part of this blog. And it was like instant recall of a tremendously significant part of my childhood, you know. I've made a lot of money, and I have none left. Like George Best said, you know, somebody said to him, he says, "You've made an awful lot of money and you don't seem to have any." He says, "Yeah, I know." He said, "I've spent all of it." He says, "Most of it on booze and girls, the rest of it I squandered."
Yeah.
I've been to so many places, and there's so many places that I've really fallen in love with. When we go on tour, we're not tourists.
Right.
It is work.
Yeah,
It's a long day.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like a 14, 16-hour day, every day.
Is it? How come? Preparation.
Well, get up at 7 o'clock, go to the airport, get on a plane, fly to a French city, arrive, take a taxi to a bookstore, meet the bookstore owners, have a conversation, grab some lunch, start the book signing, run it until 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening, go to dinner with the booksellers, and the editors and the whoever else, the press or
This
whoever.
way, please. Sorry. Okay.
Go to the hotel, 1 o'clock in the morning, fall asleep, get up at 7, go to the airport
Yeah.
or the train station,
Yeah.
3 hours on the train. It's like that every day for 10 days.
No.
What is success? Success is merely one's own perception that one has achieved what one intended to achieve, whatever that intention was. And waiting for other people to validate that is a fundamental flaw in Western attitude. You know, Western society, certainly Anglo-Saxon society, one of the most predominant and ultimately pointless pastimes seems to be worrying about what other people think of you.
Do you think you've got through that completely now?
I this past year, my attitude has changed in so many subtle ways. I understand more about myself. I understand more about what I want in life. I've let go of certain fixed ideas I had about what it is I feel I need to be doing in order to prove to myself that I'm a success, quote unquote. And I've become an awful lot more relaxed. I remember something that Stephen Fry said when we saw him at Bridgewater Hall. He said, you know, as far as he was concerned, the thing that changed most with age were priorities. And that sense of nervous agitation that I have to be doing 5 things at once,
Yeah.
I've kind of realised ultimately that it's kind of counterproductive, because competence is probably nothing more than the ability to do what you're doing when you're doing it. I think in the last year to 2 years, I've changed more than I have in the previous 10, in the previous 20, certainly from a positive point of view. I know I'm easier to live with, a lot easier to live with.
Right.
I'm a lot less on edge, a lot less anxious, a lot less agitated, a lot... You know, I used to constantly worry about whether or not there was going to be enough money, whether or not this, whether or not that. And I've kind of got to the point where I thought, well, the worry in and of itself solved nothing.
Sure.
It's you know, trying to explain it from a mental point of view. There's an inherent faculty, for want of a better description, that the mind has, which you tend to get what you direct your attention towards.
Yeah. That's a frightening thought, but
So that which you direct your energy and attention towards becomes that much more capable of influencing the way that you feel. Worry, what is worry? Worry is trying to solve the problem when you don't have all the answers. When do you worry? When there's something that you don't know. The future. Well, who knows the future? No one. So what's the difference between someone who worries and someone who doesn't worry? Well, very simply, that a person who worries, worries, and a person who doesn't, doesn't. They're both faced with an unknownness about the future that's comparable. Because the very nature of being involved in the field of the arts carries with it
Chaos.
chaos, uncertainty, unpredictability. You know, I've had extraordinarily successful books and extraordinarily unsuccessful books, you know, and I cannot predict from one day to the next what I'm going to earn.
No,
I get
it's
paid
true.
twice a year, and until I receive the money in my bank account, I have absolutely no way of finding out what it is.
No.
And it's like, how do you organise your life like that? Well, you don't. You have to be sensible, and sensible is one thing I'm not.
Not very good at, no.
But at the same time, you know, I've seen 150 cities across 12 different countries, and I've published 15 great books, 14 great books. I'm involved in writing films and recorded 3 albums, and I've toured and I've played and I've performed and I've sung on national radio in Italy live.
And you've got a great wife.
I've got a great wife who has tolerated me with extraordinary depth of patience for nearly 30 years. The fiction that I write is predominantly driven by what people think and feel.
Yeah.
Television and film is all about what people do and say. It's
Yeah.
entirely different. You know, it's interesting actually, because the way that storytelling goes, just as a natural thing, certainly Western storytelling, you read a novel, something of significance happens, something of significance to the plot happens every 2 or 3 pages, every 1,000 words or so. So in a book of 120, 150,000 words, you've got 120 or 150 scenes of significance, which tell you the story. The introduction of a character, a dialogue, a man walks into into a room with a gun or whatever. There's a femme fatale and a scene in an office with a man with a hat and, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Film presents you with a scene of some relevance to the plot approximately every 3 minutes. Any faster than that, and the viewer tends to, quote, lose the plot, which is where the expression came from. The early days of testing how you tell stories with film in Hollywood. So if you have a film, a book, for example, 120 to 150,000 words, 120 to 150,000 scenes, and you have a film of 90 to 120 minutes that can only present you a scene of significance every 3 minutes, you're dealing with 30 to 40 scenes in a film that is adapted from a book that has 120 to 150.
Right.
That's it. Yeah. Oh, great. Thank you.
So when you see an adaptation of a book, a screenwriter, generally speaking, has written the screenplay from what's known as a treatment.
Yeah.
A treatment is created by a treatment writer who will synthesize or distill from a novel what this treatment writer considers are the most important 30 or 40 scenes, and will omit those things that he or she feels do not contribute to the narrative that they are creating. Which is why, you know, and the screenwriter may never read the book, and some choose never to read the book.
So that they read the treatment.
Yeah, so they're writing the screenplay from a treatment. So this is why you so often go and see a film and go, well, hang on a minute, what about the scene with so-and-so? And what about the thing with the dog? And he had 3 wives, not 1.
Yeah.
And what about the death of the son? And, you know, all of this stuff is omitted, which is why people are routinely disappointed with films. It's very rare to hear somebody say, I read the book and saw the film and the film was so much better. It's usually the reverse. So adaptations are quite personal to the treatment writer, the screenwriter, the director, the producers, you know. And there's only a very, very limited amount that you can put into. I mean, even now, just writing 1 episode of A Quiet Vendetta, which basically covers the first 4 chapters of the book, I've had to condense so much and lose so much. It tests you in a very, very different way. Very, very different way. Because you have to create dialogue. You either have to omit what people are thinking and feeling, or create dialogue to tell the audience what people are thinking and feeling. Because very little of it you can do with sign language, expressive dance, or body motion, you know.
Well, good acting.
Can communicate a lot, absolutely. You think of that classic scene with McCluskey and Salazzo in The Godfather, where just before Pacino shoots the pair of them, and everything is going on in his face.
Oh, in the restaurant.
in the restaurant.
Yeah, yeah.
And it wasn't until Coppola, because Coppola fought for Pacino to have that role, and the producers, no. They
Yeah.
wanted Redford and different people. They wanted superstars.
Yeah, yeah.
But he fought for it, and it wasn't until they saw the rushes of that scene that they went, oh, okay, he nailed it. What's better, a portrait that is so strikingly accurate, it's almost photographic,
Yeah.
that nevertheless possesses no life,
Element of the person within.
or something that's impressionistic, almost abstract. I was watching the Picasso's Last Stand last night, and you know when Francois Gillot talks about La Femme aux Fleurs, I think
Yes,
it's La
indeed,
Femme aux
and she
Fleurs.
preferred the painting rather than the photograph of her.
Yeah, she
self.
says I recognise myself far more in the painting
Yeah, yeah.
than in a photograph, you know, which I thought was extraordinary.
So if you could be painted by any artist from history, who would it have been?
Andrew Dixon, I think.
The correct answer.
Well, I mean, who do I mean? Who,
Dramatic.
I mean, Rembrandt,
Well, good choice.
Oh,
good
goodness
choice.
me.
Yeah.
Velasquez.
Goodness me.
Vermeer. I mean, you know.
Yeah, you're only allowed one though. You can't sit there reading them off for the next half hour.
Flash answer then, Rembrandt.
Yeah, okay, good one. Yeah.
Well, we're almost done,
Okay.
I think.
Can you not continue it?
It could be.
That is a possibility.
It is a
Take some
possibility.
photographs now
But
in the same light,
Mr.
King.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
We bring the chair forward and take some photographs. Oh, no, not just yet. Just hold your horses. I'm just going to...
Easy, Tiger.
Down, boy!
Have you ever tried painting?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I did a diploma in graphic art and design at Bourneville, and
Yeah, you did graphic.
I only did a year. I was supposed
Wow.
to do 2. My grandmother died a year in, and I dropped out. But I painted, yes, watercolor, very little oil, some acrylic, but was little airbrush and bits and pieces.
So anyway, Roger, are you optimistic about the future of humanity?
I actually am.
You
I
are?
actually am. I think that, you know, societies seem to cycle through phases. And I think we are cycling towards a phase where ecology, literacy, education, equal rights, tolerance, lack of prejudice are going to become the watchwords. I think that the fundamental goodness of man ultimately cannot be submerged.
Nice attitude, yeah.
And I think that for the many thousands of years that we've been around, the simple fact is that we're still around. We do have an opinion and that we do have a voice and we should be heard. And people should pay attention. I am the eternal optimist. I am the eternal optimist. I really am.
Please click on the symbol to subscribe to our channel.